Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Rachana Adyanthaya was born and raised in England and now resides in the U.S. She's the founder of CR8MyChange, which offers individual and group consulting and coaching, and is an organization that helps women fill their future with a career that they've dreamed of that's financially satisfying and a calendar that works while raising a family. She's here to share stories of her mother, Ritha, who was born and raised in India and has longed for her children to hang on to their Indian background and culture. Rachana didn't tell her parents she was starting her new business years ago, thinking they wouldn't consider it a viable or legit business. Again, those generational and cultural differences didn't make it easy for her mother to truly understand these non-traditional roles for women. Case in point, as a teen, Rachana was a tomboy and loved sports over fluffy pink dresses, and her mom couldn't quite wrap her head around that either. Education was always a high priority in the household. Rachana's mom was always available. She was generous, smart, and supportive, and gave up so much for her family and children. Hello, Rachana. It's a pleasure to speak with you on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Hello, Jackie. Thank you for having me on.
As I mentioned, your mom's name is Ritha. Is there some sort of translation for her name? Or?
No, not that I know of. It's not a very typically Indian name. So, no, I'm not sure what the translation would be on that.
Your mom and dad left India once they were married and moved to London. So those cultural identities are like all that she's holding on to in a way, that they're so significant for her that she was pressing them upon you as you were growing up. Is that correct?
Yes, it was all she knew growing up, and as a mother myself, raising two children. Much of how we raise our children is based on what we ourselves know and have experienced. And I think that was very true for her also, even though she was in a different country.
And is she from a large family, your mom?
She is, yeah. And, family life in India, it includes extended family, aunts and uncles. You just have a lot more interaction with the wider family. It's not a nuclear family setup. And I think that that's really quite hard to come from that setting and being in a very nuclear setting where buck stops at you. There's really not much help, and the support system isn't the same.
The culture shock alone, I would imagine, from her leaving India. Your parents, they had already been married in India, and then they came to the UK. That must have been a tremendous culture shock for your mom.
Yeah, I can only imagine. She talks about, getting on the bus with 3 young children and going to pick up groceries. And, this was before the age of internet shopping, where you could get things delivered, and just the basics involved real coordination, and it's just a lot tougher. She didn't jump in the car. They lived in London, and I know what it's like. I lived in London for many years, but just going and picking up your groceries, you don't do a big shop, you do a little one that will last you
one day, one meal.
Yeah, because you're carrying those bags home. And so just even something as simple as that, navigating that with holding 3 children and making sure they're safe and they're not crossing the road or doing something dangerous. I just imagine it would be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's not running to Costco or Sam's and
filling
up the SUV.
Right. So it must have been a huge transition for her. I can't even. I remember her telling me about, this is back in the day when they used to make calls back home, and they would get 1 call a month or thereabouts, and they'd call the operator.
Right, long distance.
And they would hardly get any time. But we are so spoilt now. I speak to them almost daily on WhatsApp, and there's just so many more options. They see my children via FaceTime, and I find that hard, even though they can see us. I can't even imagine how they felt. Mum said she wrote lots and lots of letters home, and she would wait for those letters. It's just a different time.
Waiting for the correspondence to come back and answer your questions. My mom
Yeah.
used to write to us when we were in college, and I know it's not the same thing, but then when my parents would go to Europe during the winter or get away, I was born overseas, but she would write letters, and there's 7 of us, and she would pretty much write to all of us. These lengthy on airmail paper,
Yes,
the
on
light paper, so it
airmail.
wouldn't weigh as much. And
Right.
oh my gosh, I have a bunch of those letters, which I love.
And it's beautiful though, because you probably keep them. Sometimes I think, oh, did they say that? I can't remember. But I remember my mum rereading those letters. She
Yeah.
would pour through them. So
I could see her, just her heart pounding and
yeah,
coming alive. Every letter and every sentence just had such
yeah,
richness. There is something to be said for that in this day and
there
age,
is.
with everything is speedy and immediate.
There's something beautiful about it in the fact that I think you probably think about what you're writing, what you're saying, you're putting pen to paper. I always think that's huge. When you put pen to paper, things stick a little bit better. And I think there's obviously that romantic, oh gosh, it's great. You get a letter and you reread it. But yeah, I think it sticks more. I think now we take it for granted a little bit that we can access them while there is this wonderful ability to be able to contact them at a second's notice. There's also something lost in that process too.
Absolutely. But you said she's a great grandmother. When she comes to visit, she cooks. She'll start cooking again, and all the spices you can smell. Oh,
Yes,
I
she's
was dreaming
super.
of that.
Well, so are my children, actually. They're always like, gosh, the food is so good. My kitchen, she starts cooking fairly early and she takes over the kitchen. And I have to say it takes a little bit of adjustment because we have our routine in the morning and it's usually fairly fast.
Right. Oh, I understand. But still, it's pretty dreamy and nostalgic.
Yes, yeah. So they really enjoy that then. And it's just, food is love for my mum as it was for my grandmother. And it's really the ultimate expression of her love for her family. So it's lovely that she does that for my children because I think they feel a little left out when
Well,
my cooking
we're all so busy, right?
yes, yeah.
Did you grow up speaking Hindu at home, or what language
No,
did you
I
speak?
grew up speaking Thulu at home. Thulu is it's an oral language and it's spoken in a very small part of India. And the only way this language survives is by teaching the next generation, essentially. So I grew up speaking that with my parents, but also to my grandparents. So it was important because she was very particular that we all understood the language, but also could speak the language. And so she instilled that in just right from a very, very young age. That was of high importance to her. She's a little disappointed that we haven't done the same for our
That was
children.
my next question.
Yeah. Yes, it's funny because English is very widely spoken in India. So whilst it's wonderful to have it, I suppose it's time. Really, we sort of go in and out of the language. So my children understand certain words, but they don't speak it. And it's something that I think I would like them to at least understand. We talk about doing it, we just don't do it. It's
It's
terrible.
amazing because my mom used to speak to, I'm Italian American, but my
Yeah.
family lived in Spain for a number of years. And my mom, when we
Okay.
came back, she taught the 3 little kids, and I'm the youngest of the 7, but also the youngest of the 3 little kids, as we're still
Okay.
kind of called today,
Yeah.
ironically. But she used to actually sit down and teach us with a chalkboard and the
Wow.
conjugations of verbs and things. But, we were such smarty pantses, we would
Yeah.
respond in English and we knew exactly what she was saying. And my ear is still pretty good. And even though I've studied a couple of different languages, I don't have the opportunity to use it. So I've it's all tucked away in my brain somewhere. But if you just start talking, in the house, then your children will have a good ear for it. That's a huge beginning.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I blame my husband. He speaks it, his accent is better than mine, and he speaks it very well. And I would say, you speak in Telugu and I'll speak in English, so that they have that.
Yeah, you can do that too, right?
Yeah, so we'll
Put
we'll
that on the
get there.
back burner, as they say.
Well, it needs to be up at the front. There's so many things, but you have to make time for this stuff. Yeah.
So your mom, I assume, maybe I shouldn't assume, did she ever have a job?
She did not know. So she is a graduate. She graduated in economics and politics, and by all accounts did very well.
But that would be higher education.
That's higher. That's college. Yeah.
Wow, that's very impressive for a woman back then.
Back in those days, yeah, it wasn't. Usually they didn't go. I shouldn't say it's a blanket thing, but it was somewhat rare to go to university, and the expectations were always that you would get married, settle down, and your job was to raise your child or raise your children. And I think for my mom too, that was certainly the expectation. But her father was fairly forward thinking, and I believe at one point he thought she should go into medicine. And she said,
that's interesting.
I do not want to do that. She had been raised, and her mum was very traditional to think that, well, I've done quite well. I've got this far, and that's plenty. So she didn't. She was happy with where she'd gotten, and she also tells me that she was pretty laid back with her studies. She didn't have the same. She didn't have the same expectations as the boys did, but I think she did very well. So
without really having to try.
Yeah, without really having, and she's so smart. Her math is better than almost anyone I know. You think about all the things she would have been very good at, but she does say sometimes, she says, "Oh, I wish I'd worked." So I think that's maybe a slight regret on her side. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know whether it's like a wishful, oh, maybe it would have been fun, but I don't think she'd ever regret bringing us up as the first priority. That's certainly something that she has told us over and over again.
So what does she do in England now? What are her passions or interests?
So she's very sociable. She has a good set of friends, so they go for walks and
very good, very healthy.
Yeah, they're very healthy. No, she's very healthy. They have this regime, and they eat their fruit in the morning, and then they, I could go into chapter and verse about their
daily life,
which seems far healthier than ours. She has friends, and then she does a lot of these like Sudoku and mind games. She's always loved anything like crosswords, and she loves anything that's a bit of a challenge to her for her mind. So she does take time out of her day to do that.
That's why her brain is still so sharp. Like my brain is total brain fog.
So is mine. I think she does that, and then she'll watch a few of her favorite Indian serials, which are all very dramatic. And
oh my gosh, that's
great. She'll have those playing in the background when she comes in, comes over. My children are always like, "What is she watching?"
It's her One Life to Live. It's the American soap operas that just drove everybody crazy and kept them so captivated. But you have to have that downtime too, right? So
you do.
Good for her.
And I feel like she's got a fairly good balance. She's a really late sleeper. She doesn't need a lot of sleep. We used to joke that she could be the Prime Minister because she can function on 3 hours sleep easily, and be as sharp as an L. And
Wow,
I'm
right when she gets
thinking,
out of bed, she's
yeah,
there, she's present.
yeah. Whereas I need 8 to 10 hours. I'm just,
Good for you.
I always sort of used to laugh and say, I don't know how I'm your daughter because you need no sleep.
How many siblings do you have?
I have two. I have an older brother, it's 5 years difference, and then a younger brother, a year and 10 months difference. But he passed away, yeah, 11 years, almost 12 years now, um, from cancer. It's a very rare cancer, called a Ewing sarcoma of the soft tissue, and it was in his stomach. And so that was obviously, heartbreaking for our family. We're very close, and um, he found out when he was 29 years old. He just finished his medical training as an ENT surgeon.
Oh my
So
gosh.
his life was just, ahead of him. It just did, I remember going through it and thinking it just doesn't make sense, but these things never do. And yeah, that rocked us. It still does. It's very hard. It doesn't get. I'd say that people say, "Oh, time is a healer." Time definitely. I think the acceptance gets better with time, but I think there's always a scar. There's always a wound. So yeah, it's
Time helps you start to be able to breathe, maybe? Start to breathe again.
yeah, yeah.
Was your mom stoic, or what kind of role did she take on? Did she let you see her mourning?
Yes, she did. She was at a loss with it all. She was by my brother's bedside, day in, day out. She really didn't sleep. She was there beside him. Um, and both my parents, in fact, even, my dad, who's always been the very kind of firm figure, that it was very hard to see the family just it felt like we were collapsing. There was this,
Crumbling, right?
yeah,
That's very hard.
yeah. So that was, and that it still is. It's we talk about him a lot. And I think that's wonderful. We have some really amazing memories and stories, and he's so loved. I don't. I still believe he is with us. Just we can't necessarily see him, and that's, everyone has different beliefs, but that's the way we see it as a family, and we'll relive some of these memories that make us laugh. And
I'm right
yeah,
there with you with that philosophy. I'm sure he's with you, very close by.
yes, yeah, I agree too. So that's been hard for my parents too. With as you age and you're getting older, and it's not the natural way. Um, so that's really had a huge impact on them, and even I think the way they see life. They love hanging out with my children, and you have a new appreciation of how fragile and how much we take for granted, and we really shouldn't. Each day is a blessing. So
Yeah, I think that's an important message, and your brother wouldn't want you to be sad and not living a full life either, right? So you have to
yeah,
pick yourself up
yeah,
every day and have his spirit come
yeah.
through you and get you up and out the door, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
That's
So
important.
it is important.
And it's a good lesson to learn, too, that life is fragile, because it is. Unfortunately, you had to lose somebody. I say the sun comes up every morning, and it's hard, but you have to keep moving forward.
You do, yes, and it's accepting and then moving forward with that.
Your mom couldn't quite wrap her hands around you being a tomboy,
Poor mum.
and you were a little reluctant to tell her about your new career. So,
Yes. Well, that could have been me too, but the tomboy part, I think, she had two boys, and she was probably really excited that I was the middle one, by the way, but she's probably excited that, she had this little girl that potentially she could dress up in fully dresses. And yes, I would oblige, but very begrudgingly. um, and I was always the one that was, climbing the trees and came back with wounds and yeah, I think the boys would watch me first. Right.
Oh my gosh. Culturally, is there are the women are more demure and the girls are more demure, or was this a total, I was going to say Americanization, but you were living in the UK. I mean,
Yeah.
was
I
this a
just think it was
shock?
me. I don't know. I don't. I think she probably would have liked me to played with my dolls and coloured, and it just wasn't the daughter she got given. I was the one. I started doing gymnastics at the age of 5. My dad took me to a trampoline park where I was the nut job child, doing somersaults. And this lady came up to him and said, "Oh, we'd love her to come to our gym club." So
Yay!
that's how my gymnastics started. And
Oh my gosh.
I never looked back. I flung myself everywhere. And I remember at the time just loving to, like, there was nothing that I thought would be impossible. Like, I would see someone do box splits and I think, oh, I could do that. And it's very freeing. It was very kind of liberating. I didn't have that notion that I couldn't do something, which I think I developed growing up. I did.
Tell me what a box split is.
Oh, it's a split. It's
Forward facing, not
forward facing. Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
The no fear part is huge because you had no inhibition, right? But I think so much as adults, or maybe it's just me, it's that fear that gets in the way of trying something new, or am I as good as everybody else?
Yeah, I think just having brothers as well. I wasn't, and all my cousins were all boys too. So I was surrounded by, oh, let's do this and let's run around and let's run through the fields. I didn't come in there with, I don't want to get my dress messy. Or
that wouldn't go over well with the guys.
No, so I just thought I was one of them. Honestly, I just don't think I think it was a huge shock when I started at 7. I went to an all-girls school. And up until that point, I pretty much thought I was one of the boys. It's like, what's going on now? So yeah, I would say that really that's just the way I was. I was always in the dirt. I was always on my bike.
Freedom, right? Free on your bike and doing what you want.
Absolutely, yeah. But I do remember one time when we were visiting my cousin in Plymouth, and we had a birthday party, and my mum and my aunt took us out shopping, and my cousin bought this really pretty pink dress. And so my mum said, "Do you want to buy the same dress?" And I said, "No." I wanted the shorts, so I wanted the shorts and the t-shirt. And I remember the look of disappointment, but she was like, "Well, let's, how about the gingham shorts, the pink ones?" I was like, "Okay, let's do those." And then we went to buy shoes, and my cousin bought these beautiful patent pink shoes, slip-on shoes. And I remember just having a complete strop because I did not want those shoes. I wanted these stripy, they look like trainers. They were sort of, but and they were pink, so slightly gay.
You were giving your mom a little bit, an inch maybe.
No, to this day, I remember her face. I mean, she was just so, she kept saying, "What about these shoes though?" And I was like, "No, I don't want those."
Do you think
Whatever it
that she
was.
would go home at night and talk to your dad and say, "I don't understand. What did we do here?" Would they talk about things like that at night, do you think?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think my dad just fully encouraged it all. So
Oh, there you go. So she was
I
the
think,
odd man out, your mom.
yeah, I think there was a part of her that I thought actually she's very sporty too. She's very athletic. She never got the opportunities that I did, but she you can tell she's good at sport. And I think there was probably a small part of her that was like, yeah, that's great. But then there
Oh
was
my
the other
gosh.
part that's conforming to, but you don't want to be too great at that. You still want to be a girl, you know.
Right.
I think she was in conflict a little bit about,
Absolutely. But she did like the fact that your business, the Create My Change, was going to be
yeah.
helping women, right?
Oh, she loved that. And you know, it's so funny what we take on and we assume as we grow up. But they've always been very supportive of what I've my career, my sport, everything. But I didn't think that they would understand it, honestly, only because they're sort of like anything that's not a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, they just don't get. They're like, well, they do something with computers, you know, and it's like, no, well, they're the head of Microsoft. Like, you can't. It's just a generic term for them. And so I just thought, oh, I don't want to have to explain it to them because I didn't. I just thought they would be a little bit disappointed. So I didn't. I started the business, and partly because I wanted to make sure that I was fully into it. When I was doing it, I was thinking, I've never done anything like this before. What am I getting myself into? Let's see how this goes. So I didn't tell them. And then they visited um, recently, and they kept saying to me, all our friends are saying that you're doing something.
Oh, yay. All our
It's on,
friends.
yeah, it's on there on Instagram or Facebook, which of course my parents are not on, so they had no. They're like, "What are you doing?" Um, and it was very funny
They must
because
be
I
very proud.
they are. It took some explaining for them. They still couldn't quite understand. Like,
So you're coaching and training and etiquette.
yeah, women. Mostly mothers, but not all of them. But particularly women that are starting up their own business or are in a business, and they just want to excel. Things are not quite going the way they want to. So it's a wonderful balance because I get to work with these amazing individuals, and I get to see their success, and I get to be part of that journey with them. And that's just been incredibly fulfilling.
And you spell it CR8,
Hey, yes,
My
my
Change,
change.
create,
Yeah,
which I love and is brilliant. And the website is CR8 or createmychange.com. Is that the
yes,
best way
that's
for people
right.
to find you?
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's just been a really fulfilling journey. In fact, and I'll share this with you, I spoke about this to my brother when he was diagnosed with cancer. And we'd have all these long talks, and at the time I was working in banking and I was working long hours, and I knew my heart wasn't in it. I knew that I didn't want to do this long term. I mean, it's fine. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I really want to do coaching, but I don't know how to do it." And I promised him that I would do it. And it took me 10 years to actually do it. And it was just, I guess there was a lot of fear of failure, and I don't know, there's having two children, moving homes, and
Am I
um,
really qualified? There's so many more
yes,
people doing it that are
oh,
better than I am. It's
oh my
that little
goodness.
voice.
Yes, it's that
It's
voice that sits on your
terrible.
shoulder, and it's like, well, what makes you different to the hundreds of other coaches that are out there, and we all have it.
Yeah, we do.
We all have it. And for me, it was like I had promised him that I would give it a go.
What is your brother's name who passed?
Sandeep. It's spelled Sandeep.
Well, thank you, Sandeep, for planting the seed.
Oh.
And thank you, Retha, for having this amazing daughter and being an incredible mother and a grandmother and guiding us along the way. And you, Rachana, for sharing these stories on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure. And, thank you for having me on. It's been lovely to share.
And we will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.